Corey Caslin on Twitter writes in and says, "Can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts on all of Zack Snyder's comments on the next episode." Well, Corey, your wish is our command. On this episode of DC On Screen, we're talking about some of the tea that Zack Snyder spilled at his Director's Cuts event at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, right after this.
Are you struggling to conceive? You have options, and at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group, we'll make sure you have the guidance and support you need. PREG is known for individualized fertility care that's unique to every patient. We take the time to provide a reassuring and empowering experience because we believe that you deserve nothing less. Let us help you on your journey to parenthood. Visit us at pregonline.com to learn more. Get the guidance and support you need at Piedmont Reproductive Endocrinology Group.
You think of Earth as a singular planet. In fact, it is anything but. For this is a story not of a universe, but a multiverse, where universes and planets, such as Earth, were replicated and mirrored across a vibrating, infinite plane. Some barely different from the next. Others drastically so.
This is DC On Screen. Every week, Dave and Jason talk about the multiverse of DC properties on film and television. But be warned, if it's been officially released, you can expect they'll spoil it.
Welcome into DC On Screen, episode 536. I'm your host, David C. Robertson, and this, the Larry Fong to my Zack Snyder, Jason Goss. What?
Apt.
What?
Apt.
I'm tempted to ask how so.
I don't really know.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd have a real response to it, so I don't know what it means myself.
No, I've got nothing.
Well, on that note, we would like to remind you guys that we are on Patreon. 324 rubles a month. That's $5 American.
Right.
Gets you exclusive content like Marvel reviews, Jason's pull list, and extra tangential content that I'm calling Chasing Squirrels, where you'll get to hear some of the tangents we have decided to cut from the free show.
Right.
Because sometimes, damn it, man.
Yeah.
We just go off.
Yeah. We hit record, and then we just forget we're recording, and then we just talk for a while. And then we're like, oh, shit, we should probably do this.
Yeah, we should stop talking about Ghostbusters now.
Yeah.
And I've been sitting on that for a couple of days, for about a week or two, maybe. Gosh, I've got a few things I could throw up, honestly. And then I kind of turned around and was like, we're about to do a Shazam review, and I don't want to flood the news feed.
No.
Or flood the feed, and then like you popped up and you're like, hey, I just posted a Jason's pull list. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to post it now then. But you know what? I was talking to Effie Oppelders, our good friend over at Stealing the Remote, loyal listener, and I said, how much is too much content? And she very rightly, I think, pointed out, we're paying for it. There's not too much.
Right. That was what I was going to tell you at some point. Also, it's a different feed for the most part, so just throw whatever up.
Yeah. So, sorry. Getting used to things, guys.
Adjusting. I get it.
All right, so
we're both about to read the Batman or the Detective Comics 1000 thing.
Oh,
I am definitely doing something on it.
You wanna just do that together?
Maybe if we can get the recording.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so this has been a pretty interesting week. It's not a big news week. Nothing really dropped except for like two things. Like they threw out like a Legends trailer.
Oh,
like a sizzle reel, and dude, it was cool. It's fun. But we
waited
can
long
talk about
enough.
that next week. Yeah, we could talk about that next week though. It's fine,
fine.
Not at all. Hell, there's probably a Legends coming up.
Yeah, it's just a sizzle
watch
reel.
the show.
Legends is coming up in like what? Next Monday, I think.
Well, the sizzle reel is like straight up. It's a trailer. It's dope. It's fun. It's great.
Either way, I mean, okay, great. Our review of it is Dave saying it's dope. It's great. It's coming out next Monday.
Pretty much,
that's the first episode, so we'll be good.
The other thing that happened is like Matt Reeves said that it's probably going to be like early December for the Batman to start shooting.
Oh, that's solid.
So
that means they really do like whatever script they're working on.
Yeah. So that all said, we're 5 minutes in. What else are we going to talk about for this episode? Yeah. So we just thought it'd be fun to kind of hang out and talk about this Zack Snyder event. We have people writing in asking about what we think about comments that he's given. we're not going to do a play-by-play. If you're not privy, Zack Snyder, he held a 3-day event called the Director's Cuts. He held it at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. This is the school where Snyder earned his Bachelor of Fine Arts in Film back in '89. I think he sits on the board of trustees. It was a charity event to raise money to refurbish the Amundsen Auditorium. And the first night he screened Dawn of the Dead. The second night he did Watchmen, and the third night he did Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And they had a Q&A session after each one. And you can actually watch it. I wanted to go, but I knew there was no way I was going to be going. It was like $270-something, and I'd have to fly out to Pasadena.
Right.
I would love
it would cost
to
us
go.
Thousands.
Yeah, it would be ridiculous. Like, there's no way. But they mercifully decided to host this thing live on Vero, so they actually did have a live video feed. And the audio quality is not great. The video quality is not great. Like, it is janky.
Nice.
And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, no wonder you're holding a charity event to try to get this thing refurbished because the audio is terrible. I don't know if that's like a live feed thing, if that was Vero's thing, if they're to blame for it. I don't know what's going on with that. But you can mostly hear what's being said. I'm not going to go over play by play. This was like some 5 to 6 hours, something like that. And
right.
I listened to it over the course of like 3 or 4 nights. And it's all really interesting if you like Zack Snyder, like his movies, or are just interested in filmmaking and don't have a dog in the fight. You know what I mean? Like, and the thing you have to like Travis Hines messaged us, and he messaged me, and he says, when you guys do your next news podcast, can you please take a few moments to inform people who were critical / disliked Snyder's DCEU movies that they probably wouldn't like his Q&A on BVS and what he had to say. My timeline is flooded with negativity from people who hated BVS. How did they not think they would disagree with what he had to say?
Pretty much, yeah.
And he says they just listened so they would have another thing to hate and generate clicks, if you ask me. I absolutely agree 100% on the exact same page as Travis on that.
Honestly, a large percentage of people like that, because it's a behavior type, you already didn't like a thing. You saw something happening about that thing. You probably really didn't look into it that often. I mean, some of them did, I'm sure, but the majority, I'll bet, didn't even look into it. Saw a couple of headlines, saw a couple of quotes, got, confirmation biased into anger, and tweeted about it anyway.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though, is one, yeah, you're probably not going to dig this if you're not a Zack Snyder fan. I mean, if you're just reading the quotes, it seems much angrier. Stuff that he said sounds a lot angrier than it was, because you have to understand, this was a laid-back event, man. Like, there was like 30 people in a room with Zack Snyder, maybe more, maybe a little more, but no one, it wasn't like Snyder bros hooping and hollering. There was like, it wasn't people like viciously attacking Marvel. Hell, I didn't put it in the notes, but you know what? There's a bit where Zack Snyder, this is during the Watchmen Q&A, because hey, he doesn't talk a whole lot about this stuff during the Dawn of the Dead stuff. He's actually just talking about like how he met Larry Fong and like how he got into the business. And it absolutely is worth listening to. I'm putting a link in the show notes for you guys if you want to go listen to it. It's really interesting. But it's fans. It's fans of Zack Snyder's. You could tell Zack's had a couple of drinks. I mean, seriously, you could tell he's had a couple of drinks.
Right.
I don't know if you know him, Dave the Film Junkie. He actually recorded a little thing with Zack Snyder because he went, and Zack filmed an opening for Dave's show, his YouTube show, and Zack is toasted, man. He's
nice.
Okay, I'm Zack Snyder. It's funny.
Nice.
And other people had stuff to have posted stuff of him talking with them and signing posters and stuff. By the way, that poster looks fantastic.
So he had a good weekend.
The show, our show art is going to probably reflect that poster to some degree. So yeah, nothing is malicious here. Like at some point during the Watchmen Q&A, he talks about like, he's like, look, I go and see all of those Avengers movies. I love those things. They're great. You know, he's just talking about how like, he's like, you got to be open to different kinds of things. So there's no hatred there from Zack.
Naturally.
Like there's nothing malicious. Like someone asked him what his favorite Spider-Man movie was. He said Spider-Man 2. And, you know, and everyone cheered. I don't get it. Spider-Man 2 is not my favorite Spider-Man movie by a long shot. But, you know, and then he was joking around about how like, I say, I love Tobey Maguire. Other people are going to be, and people will be like, I heard he hates Tobey Maguire. He said that? Yeah, he said, I hate Tobey Maguire. No, I said I liked him.
Yeah.
Everyone
in the industry is on the same page on this. Like, there's no competition. There's no real, nothing more than friendly competition as far as. I'll bet there's some in talk about like, hey, did you see what they did with those effects? Oh man, that was good. We gotta try to get up to that level. That kind of thing. There's probably that, but not real like, oh fuck Captain Marvel, Shazam's coming out.
And we talked about it a couple weeks ago, and this week that was another piece of news that dropped this week that was just kind of repeat news. But Peter Safran was like again reiterating that like, look, James Gunn, like we love that he's a Marvel guy and a DC guy. Like there is no competition. Please stop doing this. Like he was reiterating. He said it a few times now.
Internet, please cease activities.
Yeah, he actually said the Marvel DC rivalry is bullshit. That is what Safran said this week.
Right.
But anyway, so a bunch of people have been really upset about some of Snyder's comments, and either because they're upset that some of the stuff he was talking about didn't happen.
Sure.
And that's absolutely natural. It's not a reason to be so down on what is coming that you miss out on that.
Yeah.
Because stuff does look. Thing is, or a lot of people are mad actually about what Snyder says in a Watchmen panel, and they say it's disrespectful to the fan base. I don't feel that way. I know a lot of people don't think I'm a real Batman fan. I implore you, go check out my Instagram feed. Mm-hmm. You will find out that that's very, very inaccurate. Mm-hmm. My wife and my wallet will tell you a very different story. Than Dave is not a Batman fan.
Yeah.
So I can accept a lot of different versions of the character and still enjoy it.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I've said it before.
He's there for exactly that reason. The reason he's been around for freaking 78 years now, something like that.
And I've said it on the show, and if you go back to our early episodes, we were way more down on Zack Snyder because honestly, he hadn't done BVS yet.
You were. I enjoyed the hell out of Man of Steel.
Well, yeah, that's right. It was me. But we both had a lot of jokes about how like, oh, well, if Batman kills in this movie, we're just going to leave and blah, blah, blah. We joked around about that.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, he killed a whole lot in the movie and I didn't give a shit because I loved it.
No, he slaughtered. It was fine. It was fine.
So I've been on record on this show as saying, I do not always agree with creative decisions Zack Snyder makes. I do prefer Batman who does not kill. That said, I understand like BBS, like he killed in every movie. And I know that that's a common argument, but what is not a common argument is the fact that this was the only Batman movie. BBS was the only Batman movie that made it an issue where they pointed out that this was a departure from what Batman does. And also like, this is a bad thing.
Yeah. The irony of that being taken poorly it's just palpable.
Yeah, I mean, they pointed out
he literally has shrugged people off like over towers, but like he just kills and they just move on to the next frame. No big deal,
right? And I would say, like to be fair, Batman Begins, like in the Nolan trilogy, they try to do it where there's like, we don't use guns, we don't kill, I won't kill this man, but then like the next scene, he's killing people.
Yeah,
it's like I won't kill this man. Okay, well I'll set this entire monastery on fire and people are dying left and right, but I won't kill.
Right.
Come on, guys.
They even focus on one guy who clearly died during that scene.
They did. So anyway, I don't want to jump to, I hate that. I'm sick of that argument. I'm sick of all the arguments about the killing. But this is what Zack said that prompted so much vitriol. And again, he's having a good time with his fans, and he's just talking about his point of view. And I understand what he's saying from the context. And by the way, I had to go back and like rewatch this little segment. And you know, Snyder's not the most articulate when he's speaking, so it's kind of all over the place.
Definitely
what
not
talking
when he's
about.
typing.
No, but so he's basically overall talking about it's during the Watchmen panel, and he's talking about what Alan Moore accomplished with Watchmen. And what he was going for in his movie. He's talking about like the actions of superheroes, you know, genocide for world peace, you know, basically power corrupting, absolutely, etc. And he says, someone says to me, Batman killed a guy. And I'm like, F, really? Wake the F up. And everyone cheers. And he's just kind of joking around. He says, I guess that, and he's being serious, but he's joking. He's having a good time. He says, I guess that's what I'm saying. Once you lost your virginity to this effing movie, Watchmen, and then you come and say to me something about like my superhero wouldn't do that. I'm like, are you serious? I'm like down the effing road on that. It's a cool point of view to be like, my heroes are innocent. That's cool, but you're living in an effing dream world.
Yeah.
And you know,
You got to give him credit though. In his universe, he's like 3 movies ago, I had one of the heroes kill millions of people.
Yeah.
Just why is this an issue?
Yeah, and you know what? I do like Zack Snyder. Like I said, don't always agree with what he did or what he has done in the movies. Like, I don't understand. Why would you kill Dick Grayson? I'm glad the studio came and said, don't do that shit. You know what I mean? Like, don't kill Nightwing. That's a huge moneymaker. Don't do that.
While they were still developing a Nightwing movie?
Like, people will be mad about Jimmy Olsen, Zach, and they were mad about, and they don't do Nightwing. But, you know, I don't think it's necessary. Like, I don't take issue with the arguments that people have where they're like, yeah, Zach, it is a dream world. Superheroes are in a dream world. You're a director for a dream world. Like, I get that argument. I totally understand. But I don't think Zack Snyder was the right guy to do what Warner Brothers wanted to do.
I mean, that's not necessarily true, though. I think he was the right guy when they hired him, and they got reactionary. It was my take on it. So.
I absolutely still agree that they're too reactionary because, see, I think the issue was like Warner Brothers wanted a shared universe franchise. You know what I mean? They wanted the Avengers. They wanted to do what Marvel was doing.
Yeah, of course.
Zack Snyder.
Because it was making money and it was a good format and they had the same toys to play with. And why would you not?
Absolutely. Warner Brothers, they're interested in the business side of things. Zack Snyder wants to be Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder is a fan of the comics, and I dare you to go listen to these Q&As and say this man doesn't know about the comics.
Oh,
the man knows about the comics.
Definitely does.
But I think he clearly has an affinity for Alan Moore. He clearly has an affinity for Frank Miller. And if you're not down with that, you probably won't like Zack Snyder. And I don't think that though Alan Moore and Frank Miller are conducive to the mainstream audience. And I've said it before, BVS was a freaking $400 million indie movie.
Yeah.
And they do, by the way, talk about like how much they kind of mentioned they were like something like 20 million in the hole in Watchmen right away on their budget because there were previous versions of Watchmen. It is super interesting because they actually do get into a lot of that stuff. But
yeah, we've talked about that several times. Like your budget is not necessarily everything down to the catering, man. It's shit that came before you, rewrites, page one retreatments, all that crap. Stuff
and
that
I will bet
you walked in way after, and yeah.
And I would bet anything that the studio said they wanted this movie to be, since Batman was in it, I bet they jumped at that because they wanted to be able to call it some variation of Batman versus Superman because they had a previous Batman versus Superman movie. I think it was Wolfgang Peterson, and they had already spent so much money on that movie and it didn't get made. This isn't anything Zach said in the panel right here. This is just my conjecture. I don't think Batman v Superman actually cost $400 million. I think it was $400 million after they factored in all that other money they spent making the Wolfgang Peterson movie that never happened.
Yeah, I'd put money on that. And there has been, wherever we heard about it, it's hanging around in my memory somewhere, and hopefully it's accurate, that many mentions, I want to say, from about his version, he didn't want to make a BVS movie. He just kind of mentioned during one of his meetings that he'd like to have those two face off eventually, and they're like, okay, cool, that's what you're doing for the next movie. And he's like, no, that's not, that's not the plan. And it just didn't fucking matter. It
Yeah,
was over.
I think what he said is he had an idea of someone sending kryptonite to Bruce and it being like a reveal, like it was Wayne Manor, and
okay.
he was just kind of a joke. And then like,
Because he wanted to do a solo Batman film second.
well,
If I recall.
no, he was developing Man of Steel 2, if I recall.
Well, he was
And-
definitely doing that at the time.
And he kept looking at it and going, and like every time they would talk about it, it would just keep kind of going back to Batman. He's like, Batman's one of those guys that once you pull him out, you can't really put him
Can't
back.
put it back in the jar or whatever he said. Yeah.
But Zach has said, if you're complaining that there's not a Man of Steel 2, there is. It's called Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Right.
So, and I get why you wouldn't if
there a
you
Man of Steel
disagree with
3?
that, but
Called Justice League.
yeah, and I think that's what he was doing. But
He had a 5-parter that would have been a lot of fun, but
so the next thing I have up for him to talk over that I noticed that was interesting is someone asked about how the Martha scene came about, and he says it's funny because Chris Terrio and I, we did reach that point in the movie in our discussions. We knew how to get them to fight, but how do you get them to stop fighting? That's a tough one. And we were sort of just throwing down on their humanity, and Batman realizes Superman has humanity. It's not just a creature. He's a man. He's an alien, but he is as human as, in a lot of ways, he's more human than him, right? He's sort of embraced all the good parts of the human race, and so Batman's able to sort of see, in a lot of ways, a thing that he is not. And I think that was how we started to talk about it. And then he says, and it was actually Chris Terrio who told me, he goes, just saying, is it weird that their mothers have the same name? And I was like, that's crazy. Is that true? That is true. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how the conversation started. It's as simple as that. So that's kind of how it started. And then we started to talk about how it could work. And if it was Lois that said it, maybe it's better. It's that kind of thing. Look, it's a mythological construct. I have no problem with that part of it. And then he starts laughing. And he goes, they also thought about that maybe Martha Wayne didn't die, and that she got put into witness protection in Kansas.
yeah.
That was a joke. No. That was a joke. He was like, yeah, we talked about that, but there's only so far you can push things.
Right.
But yeah, it is interesting that Chris Terrio came up with that. But yeah, it's never bothered me. It is a mythological construct. It makes perfect sense the way they used it to me. I felt like I knew exactly. It was one of those things where like I knew enough when I was watching it to go, that's got to be shit on.
Yeah. No, I knew when I was
walked out of that
watching it,
theater ready to defend that.
I didn't even walk out ready to defend it. I walked out kind of ready to kind of say like, yeah, that's the weak spot. Like the rest of this is like it's a playground of philosophy and versions of these characters that, like we've watched so many versions that this was refreshing. Mm-hmm. It was really nice to see someone do an art house take on fucking stuff that's normally treated with this campiness that it doesn't need to be. You can do this. It was a lot of it. I thought, oh, this is good. And then that moment, I thought, that's going to be the weak link. That's going to be the thing that I'm not sure I'm not sure I can defend that. And I'm still there with it. I still don't think it was played up so well that it's. I do. I still think it's the weak link.
It's not where I would have gone, but and I did recognize it as I was watching it as a weak link. I went, oh, I know people are going to be mad about that. People are going to make fun of that. But I also
like the Martha thing is cute, and I wish there was a better way you could use it. I remember being a little annoyed because I'd been talking to you about around that same time. I was like, you realize both their names are Martha. Like somebody's going to do that with. Somebody's going to do something with that eventually. And then I thought...
And now no one ever can.
Yeah,
again.
And then I saw it and thought, that's not how... I don't know, that's not how you should have done that. But...
Yeah, that's not how I would have done it.
But I remember thinking, like, there's other ways you could have done this. Like, even if he had just said, save my mother, like, that seemed, to me, would bring another level of humility to it.
Well, what they were going for, and what the thing that I liked about it is that Martha... jarred Batman enough to kind of snap him out of it for long enough.
Yeah, in a PTSD kind of sense, I totally get how that was a trigger in one direction. Completely get that. And the thing is, like, I can justify everything that happened. It just didn't hit in a way that I you know what I mean? Like it just didn't. hit.
Yeah.
There's a way that
It
some scenes
didn't-
hit you right in the gut, and you're like, oh, okay, that's impactful. And this scene was, everything moved on without it feeling as impactful as I wanted it to feel.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where it's like it didn't like the argument. Like I want to defend that scene more because I hate that argument. That's like, oh, they suddenly stopped fighting because their moms have the same name. That's not what happened.
No, that's not
what
and
happened.
It's not even what's presented. Like if that's your argument, you missed a lot of stuff in this movie. But it was still...
Well, it's because they just want to be derisive. They want to like shit on the movie and make it sound as silly as it can be, and it's not even what happened.
Yeah, I get it. But you missed all of there's a lot of psychological torment on both of their... and like for Superman and Batman that lead up to that moment being meaningful. It's just when it actually happens, I kind of thought, man, I wanted that execution tweaked a little bit.
Now, I will say there was plenty of time for when Superman, before he even landed, before he and Batman even started fighting, there was plenty of time for Superman to say, hey, look, Lex Luthor has kidnapped my mom. Yeah. There was plenty of time for him to try to talk some. I'm not saying it would have worked. I'm just saying.
No, that was the thing is like, I think for both of them before that scene, like as that scene's unfolding, they had both kind of gotten under each other's skin. Like, like I know his mom is the top priority, but he's also Superman, and he also thinks this is just a guy, and he kind of thinks like Clark Kent for the entirety of the movie has been covering Batman as a story that he thinks needs to be stopped. Mm-hmm. For a moment when he's actually confronting the guy, I think he looks at him as like, I've got 5 minutes. This needs to be addressed.
But he also knows that he needs Bruce's help to find her, I think.
I don't know if there may be a little bit of arrogance there. I'm not sure if he knows that for sure. Like absolutely it would have been the most like conductive way to do that. And, but that wouldn't have been just apparently he just shows up and suddenly asks for Batman's help.
Well, apparently there was a sequence that was cut where he flew around trying to look for Martha and couldn't find her.
Right. And in that case, if he had shown up and not asked for Bruce's help, you'd have been pretty confused. Instead, it feels like he just showed up to something, found Batman there, and said, "Well, I need to deal with this problem too." Mm-hmm. And
I'm not saying it's a
way more
perfect
than
movie.
he could chew. No, it's not perfect. Fantastic. It's not perfect.
All right, so someone asked Zach about. They asked what happened with Justice League, and what the hell happened and what was going to happen. And they asked about Steppenwolf and Suicide Squad. This was on the BVS commentary. Steppenwolf and the Parademons and Suicide Squad, and then what happened with Justice League. Zach said he doesn't know what about. He's like, I don't know what David Ayer was doing with Steppenwolf. He's like, he's in this movie. He was in BVS. You saw him in there. And then someone else said something about Granny Goodness, which I've never heard before. And then Zach was like, oh yeah, if he had done Granny Goodness, that would have been cool. Granny Goodness is cool and weird. Yeah. But he did later reference, so it does seem like he may have told Ayer at some point, you can't use Steppenwolf because Steppenwolf's here in Justice League. Right. So I'm not sure how much he really knows, but he did talk about trying to get Batman and Flash in Suicide Squad and trying to get that to mesh without interfering with each other, because you don't want to, step on each other's toes. Mm-hmm. But they did want to keep it separate, except in the same universe. As for Justice League, he does say that's a good question, and he says something about how there was a backlash, people didn't like Batman v Superman, and everyone boos, and he kind of chuckles and says a vocal minority, which a lot of people on the internet has taken to mean that Zack Snyder is delusional and thinks that most people loved Batman v Superman. Guys, he was kidding.
That's a play on a phrase. I mean,
he knows that Batman v Superman did not play with the mainstream audience. He knows.
I mean, you say that.
Calm your tits.
But it made its money.
Yeah, it made a lot of money. It sure did, buddy.
It didn't make what someone projected. Hey, if you put Batman and Superman in the same film, you're gonna make 1.5, man. You're gonna blow the roof off this bitch. It didn't make that kind of money, but it should have made a ton of money.
It made a ton of money, but it should have made $2 billion. It's Batman and Superman. Let's be fair.
For me, it's more like that vocal minority joke is more about like he knows the critical response. He does. It doesn't matter how much you want to bury your head and be like, no, look, I don't want to listen to the critics. I just want to make what I want to make. And have the audience. It doesn't matter. That was a big enough backlash. There's no way he doesn't know a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely, he knows. He was even talking about at some point. I didn't put this down. He was talking about how he and Deborah were reacting to different things in the movie, where like because they're making the movie and people say, hey, you know, the what he used as an example is like, hey, you know, Jenna Malone, they think that she's Batgirl, and we're like, oh, well, that's cool. I mean, she's not. And he's like, you know, I mean, we know the truth of what it is. We know what's actually happening. So, you know, if it's like a negative response, we're like, oh, well, they'll see what it actually is. It'll be fine. But then if they're like really jazzed about it and it's not that, we're like, well, maybe it'll be okay.
Oh, yeah.
So he's like, they're aware of what the fans are saying and stuff. Absolutely. And aware of what the critics are saying beforehand.
I kind of wonder if Sandberg learned something from his reactions. But like Sandberg, even if somebody's getting excited about it and it was good press, you know, as you would say, he would still shut it down to some extent. Like, no. I'm glad you're excited about that, but that's not.
So,
which may have been the right call, in all fairness.
Oh, probably. So this next bit in the Justice League "What the hell happened" category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is exactly what I've been talking about. Whenever I say, and I know people don't like it, people get upset, when I say that we will never get the Justice League that was Zack's true vision. And here's what I mean, exactly what Snyder is saying here. All right. He says, the original Justice League that Chris and I wrote, we didn't even shoot. The actual idea, the hard idea, the scary idea, we never filmed because the studio was like, that's crazy. He even makes a little joke about it. He's like, because we're looking at the Batman v Superman reactions and he goes, well, maybe they're right. Maybe that is crazy. Maybe we shouldn't do that. He says, and they were asking what it would have been. He said, it's a long story. He says, the truth is that the nightmare sequence in this movie, Batman v Superman, it was my idea that all of that would eventually be explained. Is that a surprise? And everyone laughs. And he says, and that we would end up in the distant future where Darkseid has taken over Earth and where Superman has succumbed to the anti-life equation. He says there were a few members of the Justice League that survived to that world and that they were fighting Batman and a broken half of Cyborg. There's only half of him because of whatever happened. They were working on an equation to jump back to tell Bruce. And those were the things they were dealing with. And the studio, they were still sort of into the big look, but the deep depth about how and why everyone was mad at each other, they were afraid of. They didn't dig it. He does talk about how like the idea was, he's like, and he even jokes about, he's like, the physics of this probably don't make any sense. He says, but you know, there was an idea that like they only had 2 windows to jump back in time, and it's because the Earth rotates, and if you weren't careful, you would jump back in time, but it wouldn't be the same space, so you might actually wind up out in the middle of space. So they only had like Cyborg, you know, calculated, and they only had 2 different windows. And Cyborg said, which one do you want to go through? Or which one should we choose? And Batman said, well, which one would you choose without me? And they're like, oh, well, that one. He's like, well, use the other one, because the last time Barry showed up and he was in my Batcave yelling at me, I had no idea what he was talking about. It was nonsense.
Which sounds like a fucking hilarious little moment.
It does. So yeah, he says that. He says, bleh. Sorry.
And he is right. The physics on that are weird.
Uh-huh.
But
it's a cool idea, but it's a little weird.
It's a neat idea, but Snyder, as much as I love Man of Steel, the physics of Man of Steel, like, you go back to that terraforming scene, it's just a little bit painful.
Mm-hmm.
Not a physics major.
But yeah, he says, but Lois is in the Justice League teaser. It wasn't in the movies, apparently, or in the movie, apparently. He says, it's this line where Bruce says, I was right here, and Barry Allen came to me, and he said, Lois Lane is the key. And then Wonder Woman goes, she is to Superman. Every heart has one. And he goes, I think it's something more, something darker. And that was alluding to the fact that if Lois died, Superman would succumb to the anti-life equation. And Superman knew that it was Bruce's responsibility to protect Lois. He would have been mad at Bruce in the movie, and that's why he says she was my world and you took her from me. So he goes into how they're trying to stop the nightmare course of events. Mm-hmm. And he says there is a moment where he had to jump back right before Darkseid boom tubes into the Batcave to murder Lois. Mm-hmm. And everyone like freaks out. Like that's some crazy shit.
That is some crazy shit, but I'd eat all of that up. Just
that all sounds great.
All of it with a spoon. Yeah, that all sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So, actually, in reply to that, Corey Castlin, he was the first person on Twitter to really ask us to get into this, and I asked him what his thoughts were on all of the Snyder stuff, and he says the entire original Justice League film art from Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio sounds insanely awesome. A graphic novel put on screen. I'm pretty sick that we'll never get to see the resolution to some of the conflicts brought on in BVS. I agree. I don't know what to do with it though. Like I do agree, but this is still a young franchise.
I would love to have seen it. Like what we just heard right now, that sounds fantastic. I would love to see that. But some of the conflicts on screen, yeah, we might survive that.
Yeah, and
like they might show up later. It's going to be a few years before we know. Really.
Well, and this is like I do not believe that Zack Snyder has a future at WB.
No.
And certainly not in the DCEU.
No.
There are YouTubers out there, and one that I consistently see. I don't know. I'm not subscribed to this cat. I don't know why, but YouTube is determined that I listen to this Dingus Bringus kid, and it is a kid, and he has so many more listeners than we do. It's so sickening.
Naturally.
But he puts up these videos. They're not real videos. They're just little slideshows. But he's like, oh, this guy is having a rumor now that Kevin Tsuchihara is gone. Zack Snyder is coming back.
No.
Dude, everything this kid has said, and I've listened to a few of his bits, everything he said has been wrong. Like, he's like, Ben Affleck is definitely in the Batman. He's going to be bookending the... No, that didn't happen. No. Zack Snyder's coming back. This is a rumor, but it's definitely happening. No, it's not.
No, you might get J.J. Abrams instead, but no.
Yeah. So anyway, guys, be on point, be on guard. Don't just believe anybody on the internet.
Sure.
Honestly, like we look into this shit all day, and
yeah,
a rando guy, like even some rando guy that this kid's calling out, like, oh, he says it's a rumor. Who is this person? I know the Scoopers. This cat ain't one.
Right.
I don't know this guy. Anyway, so a lot of people were pretty disappointed that they didn't get into more Snyder Cut stuff at the Q&A. There were a couple of times, like one time definitively, I remember a guy screaming out, release a Snyder Cut, and Zach just smiled and pointed at him.
That feels exactly right, though. But
post Q&A, and there are videos. There are multiple videos, and I've watched 3 of them. There has been talk about the Snyder Cut, and this is what the talk is, and it's not going to be surprising to you. What we can glean from these videos, and by the way, Zach was pretty tipsy while he was signing these posters and things for people, and it was pretty loud. But what we can glean is the Snyder Cut does exist.
Like, oh, Zach's drunk weekend with his fans. What happened?
So yeah, Zach says. He says he has a cut. He has a few cuts of the Justice League at his house, and he I don't know if he's talking about like all the way done or like with VFX and everything, or if he's saying just like the cut is done.
Yeah,
I don't know which one.
Photography.
It was ambiguous the way he said it.
Yeah,
but he said, oh, he did say it's done. I watched him. He said it's done. It's done. And he says he does say he does not own the distribution rights, and it's all up to WB. And he does say that the Snyder Cut movement did make an impression on WB, and it has. So I this might be a situation, and I think it is a situation of like the Young Justice thing. Keep it active on social media. Be respectful. Don't be dicks, but be respectful. And maybe we might see it one day. It's not going to be the original vision, and it's not going to be the whole vision because there were supposed to be a few movies after this,
Yeah.
according to Zack's vision. But if you want to at least see the Snyder Cut, be respectful and keep your hashtag going.
You know what WB doesn't care about? I'm
What's
not going to
that?
go see X movie because Snyder Cut.
That's right.
Dude, they write you off immediately.
Yeah, WP doesn't give a shit.
Literally, from their point of view, it's okay. Well, then you're not. I can't do everything your way. I'm not counting you as. You're not a human to them. Let's be brief with it. You're not a human.
Yeah. Now, what they could do, if you're respectful and whatnot, like they could say, hey, there's a pretty big fan base for this out here. Why don't we release this cut? Because you know what? I have a very, based on everything Jason Momoa has said, I have a strong suspicion that Aquaman just picks up after the Snyder cut. And actually works for both versions.
Yeah. I still think it's not going to happen on grounds that they're just not willing to unleash that yet.
No.
Because there's still a little bit of fumbling over where the continuity is. I mean, for God's sake, we just lost the Batman casting. We're not going to get a Snyder cut in the middle of Batman not being cast. It's not going to happen. Just
there is a way to spend that
real money.
market-wise. There is a way to. Oh, I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
Zack said he's not aware that WB has any plans to release it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not here to spread false hope.
It's still like.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong,
it's
I'm
there.
wrong. I'll say I was wrong. I'm not. I don't think I'm going to be wrong about this. It's still not happening. It's years out if it happens.
My caveat would be if it is done, if it is actually done,
Yeah.
then that means they already paid that money for those effects, and there might be more incentive for them to release it.
Maybe if it's truly done. But a lot of when he left the project, I mean, it was not too long after principal photography. They had not gotten a lot done.
I don't think so.
And there's a lot of effects to do in this movie. And the fact is, we don't know where they left it and how where the project was. But
one of the things that Zack talks about during these Q&As, specifically the BVS one, is that Zack does a ton of previs. He draws the entire movie before they even shoot it.
Yeah.
And
I saw
he
that.
has
He
people
shoots pretty much everything he had in storyboard.
Yeah, and he has effects artists working on previs before or as they're shooting. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
a fair amount of that work is done. It's just putting the final touches on it and making it look, dope. Apple Farm. That's what AF stands for, right?
Right. Yeah. Because
so-
they're awesome.
Right.
Go farming. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not completely impossible, but it is a stretch.
It's a
And
stretch.
At the
and
very least, I don't
know.
think you're going to see it until Warner Brothers has decided what the DC movie continuity is going to really look like. And they're not there yet. I mean, it's clear from Aquaman and Shazam that what we're seeing right now is still in universe. But, we've still got Wonder Woman coming out that's supposed to be a standalone where you wouldn't have... It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Right.
Birds of Prey could be God knows what. And then that's going to be connected to a Suicide Squad 2 that's being called a, quote, total reboot? Is that the term we're using?
Peter Safran said it was a total reboot, but, I'm going to still err on the side of it's not a total reboot if any one of those people come back.
And you'd have to reboot it in a way it becomes very complicated because now at that point we've got Margot Robbie clearly being in the Birds of Prey movie, which you have to assume is in universe. And then you've got the Joker, which is out of universe.
Yeah.
And then if we do a total reboot of a Suicide Squad movie, then we just have really a third universe. They've got to decide where it's going to some extent. By that, I don't necessarily mean they have to pick a universe and go with it. I mean, if they decide we're just going to do whatever the hell movie we feel like it and doesn't have to be in universe, yeah, you may get that Snyder cut. Because at that point, they're just going to trust that they'll put it out on DVD and it'll make a ton of money, and it will. I mean, for sure, it will make its money. But if that's
for that
how
matter,
you do
Justice League did pretty well, and Justice League did pretty damn well in DVDs and Blu-ray sales.
Yeah, it made its money. So the franchise has made a ton of money. It's not a failed franchise by any stretch. But the only thing that failed it was the vision of the WB executives, in my opinion.
Yeah. What's funny is I saw a guy or a couple of people on social media putting out pictures of the Justice League displays, and they're just completely full, and they're like, ha ha ha, this is so sad. And I'm like, did you just stand around waiting for them to stock it and take it right when they left? Because
in my life,
whenever
I walked by and there were 2 left. Everywhere,
that's
everywhere
every time I went.
in.
Every time I went, and there were plenty of people that I knew, mainstream people who were like, hey, that Justice League movie, I didn't see it in theaters, but it turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm glad you liked it.
I don't know where that leaves it as far as the norm, but that was my experience too. It was well accepted once you actually got someone to watch the damn thing.
Yeah.
But there's a chance you see it once they decide where they want to go. But I don't think Hamada has decided exactly where he wants to go with it yet.
I don't think he knows, and
I don't think you're going to see it. They're not going to put it out on spec.
They don't want to do a big connected universe. Like they're fine with doing a connected universe and having the little like connective tissue, but I think they know that most people want that, but they want to let those characters flourish and grow and be their own thing for a while, which is, arguably what they maybe should have done in the first place. Like as a fan of the characters and as a fan of the multiverse and as a comic book reader, I'm used to all that stuff, and I was a fan of where Zack was going with a lot of stuff. But when we have like Matt on the show and he talks about like, I'm looking at BBS and I don't care about these characters because they haven't given me enough to care about. I kind of get what he's saying. You know what I mean? Like he's a filthy casual when it comes to DC. He don't know. So
I mean, I don't get it to some extent, but where they are as a company right now, I think they're looking at I don't think they think they should have necessarily, but there's definitely with Hamada and how he's treated a couple of creators so far, you get the feeling that he's willing to trust what he's doing, but he does want to keep things separated for now. And they're not ruling out that it'll come together in some way. But I think they think that it was too early and the characters hadn't fermented enough. And then it just wasn't what they really wanted to put out, which is probably all true, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the fact is it probably would have done better if they'd given it a couple more years to breathe and given the characters their own little movies and all that stuff. Like if they'd done it in the MCU style, yeah, it might have actually worked better. But it's still, no matter how you did it, MCU style or not, I just think you had so many executives, Sujihara in particular, fucking with it that it wasn't going to work from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a chance to let things ferment, let things play in their own little sandboxes, see where that gets us. And I think personally, just based on like how I would do this, I think they've probably got their eye on maybe doing this again, bringing everybody together.
Yeah,
but
sure.
They're not willing to commit to it because before they committed to it and then they messed with things and now we have this splintered fan base that they wouldn't have had if they hadn't committed to all these things and changed their mind so many times.
Mm-hmm.
That worked against them. So I think at this point and I say that again because just this is how I would think about it. I think they're going to let this play out a little bit more and see where the base is going and see what's working well and work to their strengths.
And I wouldn't.
What they did before clearly wasn't. It made its money, but it wasn't the optimal amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
It could have made more, like you said before. Like Superman and Batman should be 1 point something.
Yeah,
you're right.
It should be $2 billion. It really should. Those two characters together, with the addition of Wonder Woman, should be bringing in $2 billion.
Those are 3 of the most recognizable symbols on the entire globe.
Mm-hmm.
I could go to Siberia and flash the Superman symbol, and if somebody smiled, I'd be like, I like that guy.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if things continue to go the way they go. I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or 2 we have confirmation that they're going to do another Justice League movie, but with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and Shazam, and maybe a Harley Quinn.
Oh, yeah. No, it does not have to be a traditional Justice League. It
doesn't.
The MCU's done this perfectly well. The MCU's Avengers are not traditional. There's a lot of people that have been in and out of it, but they've played with the formula. No reason you can't do that. The other thing is no one's going to look at your Justice League lineup, and there's going to be the vocal minority of us that are like, well, that's not traditional, but and then there's going to be between us one group that cares deeply about that for reasons that I can't possibly justify, and the rest of us who think, oh well, and carry on.
Yeah, the sad truth is the real vocal minority are the comic book fans.
I know, and I feel bad because I am one, and I get it. But you also have to understand this is a different method entirely, and it's going to be different.
Yeah, I mean, the comic book fans for how many years have made fun of Aquaman. Guess what the mainstream audience thinks? Differently.
Yeah. Mainstream audience threw money at that man.
Comic book fans don't buy Shazam as a title. I think mainstream audiences are gonna.
Yeah, I agree.
So you look at the fan base. The DC fan base is splintered. There are people who say that it should only be like Justice League, the Burnett and Tim and all those cats animated series, and that's not traditional. Hot Girl is not usually a part of that lineup. Neither is John Stewart as Green Lantern. He's not usually the Green Lantern there.
No.
So
they are at the moment.
They are at the moment, but
in the books at the moment they're featured. It's exactly like reading one of those animated shows.
But then again, I remember Justice League International. I remember all that stuff, and a lot of those people weren't there. A lot of B-listers.
Yeah,
there are a lot of versions of this, guys, and as long as the mainstream audience is digging it, I don't think they're going to care if we're not.
Yeah, it's 80 years of this stuff, man. I don't care if you throw a grilled cheese in the Justice League. As long as you elevate it, we're in good shape.
And it's not that they don't care that we don't like it. It's that there are so many factions. The only thing they can do to assure success is to build up characters for the mainstream and ride that success.
Yeah.
And that also means because of the fandom and because of the public perception of the icons like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, they need to focus on characters who aren't big. That is, in some regards, following the Marvel formula, because Marvel didn't have anyone but their B-stringers.
Oh, it was the smartest thing they did, was they just took a charismatic person, put him on screen, gave him a story you cared about, and by the end of the movie, you were like, I'm an Iron Man fan. You never read one in your life. But with... over in the DC side of things, we started with the big guy. We started with Superman. You had to get that right. And then you have to check it down, and you can't just... we're not going to have a Justice League where it's like Superman and Tattooed Man and Harley Quinn or something like that. That's not going to be your Justice League. It was going to be the big guys. We're all going to be itching for a Green Lantern here soon.
Well, now that they've popped the Justice League cherry with the big guys, I don't see a problem with them doing lower characters or B-string characters.
No, you can do it. You could have done it before, and you still can do it. Mm-hmm. But fact is, to some extent, we were given heroin, and then somebody's like, "Well, I've got a good strand of weed." It's different. It's just not the same.
You just got a hold of Mark Waid's JLA Year One. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite graphics. And there are cameos, little more than cameos from Batman and Superman. But that lineup is like Aquaman, Flash, Black Canary, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern. The big guys aren't there, not really, and it works just fine. And I think they might need to go that way. I won't be mad if they do.
Yeah, hell, you know how happy you'd be with a like a Ezra Miller Flash finally do the Nightwing movie, and those two are kind of the yin and yang top dogs of the Justice League as it forms. Mm-hmm. I'd eat that up.
Yeah. All we are saying is give DC a chance. All right. I'm thinking we should call it, shouldn't we?
Yeah, wrap it up.
All right, guys. Again, remember we're on Patreon, patreon.com/DC on screen. If you had problems searching for us, it's because for some reason we were selected as adult content. We probably are adult content, but shh, don't tell them.
Not by their rules.
Fixed. You can. I guess not by their rules.
No, they approved us again. We're good.
Yeah, we're not showing titties. I don't know what's going on.
Not ours,
everyone has a big problem with female presenting nipples, so we're not going to show those. Mm-hmm. But you can search for us, or you can go to patreon.com/DC on screen. And like I said, $5 a month gets you a lot of extra content. And
I
it's
loved
actually
the email back, by the way. It was basically someone saying, "I don't know how this happened. You're good now."
So yeah, hebla hebla. Also, we're not on Spotify for some reason for a minute, and actually I know why, because we just redirected our RSS feed. We are working to get that back up and going. So if you are a Spotify listener, sorry for the inconvenience, and we'll be back shortly.
Yeah, hang in there for a minute.
Yep. So thanks for listening, guys. Let me know what you thought, or let us know what you thought. It's not just me. Jason sees it too. And until next time, keep some DC on your screen.
Our opening narration was from Dan Jurgens' The History of the DC Universe, Part 3 of 10, as featured in DC 52, Week 4. It was performed by me, David C. Robertson. Intro music by Jason Goss and Michael Shackelford. Michael's band, Future Elevators, could be found on Spotify or future-elevators.com. Our introduction was performed by Effie Oppelders of the fantastic podcast Stealing the Remote, which lives on SoundCloud. It can also be found on iTunes and Stitcher. We are proudly in partnership with TV Time, the TV show calendar and social media site that lets you keep track of what you're watching, what your friends are watching, and where you all left off. DC On Screen is a maladjusted production. Visit maladjusted.tv for more from me and Jason, including sketch comedy, an improvised web series, vlogs, parodies, and more.
Are you maladjusted?
We all love the low country lifestyle, which is why we should do our best to protect it. To get insurance that helps you protect your home from whatever the low country throws at you, contact CT Lowndes & Company today. Their local agents can review your coverage to help make sure you're properly protected. CT Lowndes & Company has been helping protect and insuring the Low Country since 1850. Visit ctlowndes.com to learn more and request a quote. That's CTLOWNDES.com.